The Beatles are arguably the most famous band ever to come out of Britain. And in this episode, we're going to dive into their history, their influence on British music and society, and of course, we'll teach you 10 key pieces of related vocabulary along the way. Welcome to the English Right Now podcast, an English learning podcast in which we do teach you at least 10 pieces of vocabulary. We say at least because it is a brilliant conversation with my dear friend, Rob. Hello.
Hola, Roy. How are we?
Bringing in the Spanish there immediately. Brilliant. How are you today?
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much. Good topic to talk about, the Beatles. We all love the Beatles, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I think even if they're not your favorite band, everybody's got a kind of song that they know and they love and they enjoy, even if it's a kind of guilty pleasure. We could talk about your favorite. When I say guilty pleasure, it's that like kind of thing we don't really talk about. But even if you're the most ardent fan of a different type of music, you've still got a favorite song, I think.
I think even if so you're not a Beatles fan, you'd recognize a song by the Beatles, or you could say a title of a song, couldn't you? Because they're so iconic.
Which is a key piece of vocabulary already straight away. And under a minute, we have got to iconic. So iconic is something or someone that is very famous and represents an important idea or style. And they're incredibly representative of that time, aren't they?
Definitely.
So I mean, we can talk about that favorite song, but what do the Beatles? Why do you think the Beatles matter so much?
I think because they formed the kind of basis of modern pop music. They were the leaders in pop music. What I also like about the Beatles is how they adapted over time from being a sort of popular music combo in the early 60s to being more experimental and trying new things out and experimenting with music. So they change with the times. So they've got a huge catalogue of different music, which kind of set the scene for other musicians and bands later on, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. If you go up to Liverpool, there's the Beatles Museum where you can really kind of get to grips. Get to grips means sort of learn about, understand, really kind of appreciate the history of the Beatles. I mean, apparently, they started out originally. John Lennon formed a group called the Quarrymen in Liverpool in about 1957, and then later on that year, I think Paul McCartney joined him, and then George Harrison joined in 1958. And I don't think it was about till 1960 they started calling themselves the Beatles. But they started off in a club. Do you know the name of the club they started off in Liverpool?
Yeah, wasn't that the Cavern?
Yeah, the Cavern Club. It's famous, isn't it? It's like a club in a city hundreds of miles away, and we all know it because that's where the Beatles started. But apparently, they originally went to Hamburg in Germany. Apparently, that's where they started calling themselves the Beatles. A lot of history that I learned. Have you ever been to the museum?
No, I haven't been to the museum. I went to Hamburg, funnily enough, last year, and you can go to the place where they played, and there's a big statue of them outside because this is kind of the start of their career, their musical career, really, as the Beatles. So an important place, Hamburg, for them.
Yeah, and I think Ringo Starr joined in around 62. So he was, I think, the last member. They had a couple of other members before, but eventually it became the what we call the Fab Four. The Fab Four was the nickname of the Beatles, the Fab Four, the Fabulous Four. And it was John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. Have you ever seen any of them in real life?
Well, I have to confess, I have met Paul McCartney and interviewed him as well for the radio. Yeah, back in yeah, look at me. I've got a picture to prove it. Back in 1990, yeah. I went to meet him. He lived in a town in Sussex called Rye, and nothing to do with music, this one, by the way. But he lived in Rye. They were closing down the hospital, so they led a big protest through the town. And I was a little local radio reporter, and I was sent down to interview him. And I got there to interview him and Linda McCartney, his wife at the time. Yeah.
Oh, nice. And was it good? Was it nice? Was he
happy
to talk?
Absolutely. He was a really, I mean this, he was a really lovely guy. He kind of put his arm around me and he said, "This is the story, Rob. This is what's happening." He was a really nice guy. And yeah, what an experience for me. And somebody took a photo and sent it to me. And of course, I've got it on the wall now.
So, no, I've never met any of them, but I've seen Paul McCartney live. I've seen him live in concert. But I think I was really interestingly, as a kid, I mean, by the time when I was born, the Beatles had kind of, well, they had broken up. So break up is a word we often use for relationships, but we can also use it for a band. Now, the technical word, according to sort of some articles, is disbanded, but we don't normally use that. We'd say they have broken up, or there was a breakup, and that was in 1970. So they well and truly finished by the time I was born. And I think my first experience, introduction to the Beatles was ironically through Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yes, I know why. Go on.
So Thomas the Tank Engine was a kids show in the 1980s, and the narrator, the guy that introduced it was Ringo Starr. And I remember my godmother. I was watching it. I was like, I loved his voice because it had such a kind of soothing quality. And I remember my godmother said, "Oh, did you know he was in a band called the Beatles?" That was my first introduction. I was very young, but I remember her talking to me about it. It blew my mind. The idea that was the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine, or the narrator, was in a band as well.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't realize how famous they were. But
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of went from strength to strength in that early phase. They released quite a few albums, and then in '64, I think they started touring America, and it's something we call the British invasion, isn't it? The British invasion was basically a wave of British bands, which was, I think, led by the Beatles, and they became hugely popular in the US during the '60s.
This is quite unusual, isn't it? Because usually American music seems to dominate the world, but this time it was the Brits going over to America and saying, "Hey, look at or listen to our music, isn't it great?" And it was popular.
I think it's doubly ironic because I once listened to somebody as well who said the reason that these bands formed, like the Beatles, was because during the Second World War, the American soldiers brought over rock and roll music. They brought over their LPs, their rock and roll albums, and then they influenced indirectly. This music became so popular here that it then influenced these bands a little bit later on.
Yeah.
So ironically, the Americans brought over music that we then kind of replicated and maybe some would say improved, and then sold it back to them. It's fascinating. But yeah, so that British invasion was just a massive kind of, it was a massive sort of thing for British bands.
Indeed. But it's incredible, isn't it, that we're talking about the Beatles now. Here's a band that were around 50 or more years ago. I'm a bit older than you, so I was born in the 60s, but I was a bit too young at the time probably to remember the Beatles. But they've still been quite significant over my lifetime. Songs you hear on the radio and people who've tried to be like the Beatles as well, So they've definitely set the scene there for the British music industry.
Yeah. What I love as well is that you talked about them, like they changed. They were very experimental, and some would say they were quite innovative with their music, introducing new and creative ideas. And I love the fact that I believe their first album contained the song "Twist and Shout," which is a very kind of it's very different to what came, and that was in '63. What came maybe 2 years later. Which was Help, which contained Help and Yesterday, which are quite different sound.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a year later, I think, they released Revolver, which included Eleanor Rigby. And the music was just, it changed so rapidly. They really experimented. They were really innovative. What is your favorite Beatles song?
Well, it's hard to narrow it down to one because in their original kind of songs, which were very kind of poppy, dance songs, and I things like "She Loves You." You know, "She Loves You." Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good traditional old pop song. No, I'm not going to sing it anymore. I'm not going to sing it.
I was excited. I was going to say, have you ever considered becoming a Beatles tribute act?
And then no, I'm not. And then and then later on, to say when they changed a bit, I like songs like "Let It Be," and then of course, the quirky ones, "Yellow Submarine." Good fun.
Oh, it's they're so different. I mean, Twist and Shout to Yellow Submarine, it's so different. I mean, I do like Let It Be. I think that's a beautiful song. I really like. There's a haunting tone of Eleanor Rigby,
Yeah.
but I think my favorite song. It was released in '67, and it was on Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, I think.
Yeah.
Lonely Hearts Club Band, and it was the song "A Day in the Life." I think that was on that album, and it's like a kind of track right at the end of the album, and it's really kind of unusual because it starts off quite. There's a lot of changes through it, but they were quite prolific because they created a lot of great albums in a few short years. Prolific means they achieved a lot of what they intended to do.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
A bit like the White Album. That was one of their very important albums, weren't they? But they were coming out almost every year, weren't they? An album a year.
I think basically, like Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was in '67, then the White Album was in '68, and then Abbey Road, another amazing album, was in '69.
'69, yeah. That has that iconic picture on the front of the band walking across the zebra crossing, the pedestrian crossing outside the studios. I've walked across it myself and tried to recreate the picture.
Did you take your shoes off like Paul did?
No, I didn't. Too dirty.
And this is something. I mean, we talked the other week about music in general, British music, and why is British music so amazing? But we need to talk about like a band like the Beatles in its own podcast because they are so amazing. And we've mentioned a few words already, but we need to talk about Beatlemania.
Yeah.
I mean, Beatlemania it's what we refer to the extreme excitement and obsession of fans that they had for the Beatles in the 1960s. Beatlemania just went insane. People were like screaming, shouting, they were fainting, they couldn't believe they were meeting the band. It was really fascinating to see.
Yeah, you sometimes see that old black and white film footage, don't you, of them arriving at Heathrow Airport in London, and thousands and thousands of people, particularly big groups of girls, screaming, crying, fainting, even with the excitement of just seeing this band. Incredible.
And we call that kind of Beatlemania because it wasn't just in England; it was the world went wild. And I often wonder, is that since then, obviously, maybe Elvis Presley had a similar effect, and some of the similar artists at the time, but I'm not sure any band has ever kind of got to those heights since. So maybe Michael Jackson, he was also somebody who could. People used to scream and go crazy to meet, but it's amazing to see this footage. So, I mean, at the end, I mean, this is the thing as well. The last couple of years, they had Abbey Road in '69, 1970, Let It Be.
Yeah.
Let It Be an album. It's just the album came one after another of brilliant albums. And then sadly in 1970, as we said, they broke up. So relatively a short period of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. Less than 10 years, really. And yet their songs live on. They're timeless, aren't they? You can
that's a word. We've nearly had two pieces of vocabulary in one go there, because we have timeless, which means never going out of style, always relevant. So their songs are timeless, and also we need to talk about their legacy. So they had this lasting legacy as a lasting impact of or influence of a group, a person, or maybe an event. So we talk about the Beatles' legacy. I mean, they've gone on to kind of inspire other bands. I mean, we can talk about what they inspired at the time, because it wasn't just music that they inspired. It was also fashion and style. They were style icons. But later on, their legacy influenced bands like Oasis.
Yeah.
We've talked about a bit before. Probably need to talk about them a bit more. But they were very, very stylish, weren't they? The Beatles.
They were. They wore suits and ties, which is, I suppose, quite the opposite of what you see now. Yeah, very, very smart. But it was obviously designed, wasn't it? It was planned that way. That was their image, this kind of clean cut image of suits. And
But they started off like that, but they didn't end up like that.
no,
they
became
changed.
Kind of, hippies almost, weren't they?
Yeah, they became a hip. I remember seeing, like, I'm sure it was John Lennon and George Harrison in fur coats and glasses and long beards. John Lennon had long hair at one point. Paul McCartney had a big beard. And then they started wearing kind of traditional Indian dress, I believe, at some point. George Harrison became very influenced by Indian music. And it was so, like they say, they reinvented themselves so many times in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And they were basically a cultural phenomenon. And that's a key piece of vocabulary. A cultural phenomenon is something so popular it becomes part of society and culture. They influence the way people dressed, the way people acted, and that didn't stop in the 60s. I don't think. I have a friend who said that when he was a kid, he was watching videos of the Beatles, and he just thought they were so cool that he wanted to dress like them. He wanted to just hang around with them. He just wanted to kind of be with them. Obviously, we were well beyond that time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's fascinating to see, isn't it, that they were so so revolutionary.
Yeah, they were definitely revolutionary. They changed everything, and because it reflected the time. The 1960s was this kind of anti-establishment, get away from the old-fashioned kind of way of living, traditional ways of living, and break all the rules, weren't they? There was sort of counterculture,
the 1950s. I mean, revolutionary, by the way, is one of our key pieces of vocabulary, and it's something that changes the way that people think or do things. And you're right, the 1950s, the 40s and 50s, late 40s, 50s. I mean, there were a time of there was a lot of kind of post-war depression, kind of financial difficulties. But it was still kind of that traditional British, almost stiff upper lip attitude. And then suddenly came these guys that said, let's party, let's have fun. And it was, I think it was a bit of a welcome break.
Yeah. Yes.
From the tradition. They were a part of counterculture, talking about like the hippie lifestyle, forming a band.
Flower power, wasn't it the time of flower power as well?
Yeah, flower power, which is strongly related to hippies.
Yeah.
And there's other such things that the Beatles did that we don't really talk about on the podcast, but we all know what we're talking about. And they kind of it was the 60s was a very experimental, very revolutionary time, really. When you think about what came slightly before, it just changed the entire shape of Britain.
Yeah.
The 60s. Suddenly girls started wearing things like the miniskirt, and it was guys started wearing had longer hair and things like this. And,
yeah.
And
I think there was more freedom. Basically, the young people could let their hair down, and it wasn't quite literally, and it wasn't frowned upon. And the Beatles reflected this. That's the thing, yeah.
But they all ended up kind of they broke up, as we said, in 1970, and there were a lot of rifts between there were some rifts between particularly Paul and John, apparently. We never know quite what went on, because it's the news, it kind of gets blown out of all proportions, and only the people that were there knew about it. But tragically, John Lennon was killed in 1980, I believe,
in New York.
They never got the chance to have a comeback. They never got a chance to kind of reunite, which is, I wonder if they would have done.
Yeah, they were key really to the success of the Beatles, weren't they? With their songwriting, they were the key writers, weren't they? And they penned all these fantastic songs.
Yeah, they did. They were prolific. And just the song after song after song. I don't know if Ringo wrote Yellow Submarine, but I think he definitely sang it, didn't he? I think it was
Yeah.
his voice on it. But Yellow Submarine. I mean, look at that. That song is just incredibly out there, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Very
there are a lot of kind of, we talk about Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, LSD being a reference to hallucinogenic drugs and things like this. But that period of time was very, very counterculture again. But
Yeah.
but when did you? So you kind of were your family members into the Beatles, or who introduced you to the Beatles?
Probably my brother, because he was born earlier, 6 years
Yeah,
before me, so the start of the 60s. So even though he was quite young, I suppose, he did get influenced to it by it, and he had some albums which I sort of inherited, I suppose, got from
yeah,
him in the 70s. So that's when I started listening to him. Also, we mentioned them breaking up, and of course, Paul McCartney went on and had a very successful career with Wings, Paul
yeah.
McCartney and Wings. And my brother had all the Wings albums as well. He used to get one on Christmas Day and play it back, non-stop all day. He'd play it. And I kind of got influenced by that. And so I really loved Paul McCartney and Wings in the 70s and 80s as well.
I love this. I think that's. I mean, the first band that I learnt about really wasn't the Beatles. It was the Kinks.
Mm,
I got introduced to the Kinks, and then like a similar way. I mean, they were still very popular at the time. But from my friend's brother, I got introduced to the Prodigy.
hmm
So I know they're very different
Yes,
band, but
yeah.
it's that same kind of family passing down. Listen to this, enjoy. I'm not sure who introduced me to the Beatles actually, because it wouldn't have been my parents. It might have been my godmother a little bit.
Mm,
Um, but during when I was born, they were a bit. It was a bit less kind of talked about. They weren't as they were still. I mean, Paul McCartney and the Wings were popular. George Harrison also had a quite successful solo career, or
mm,
successful solo career. Um, and yeah, I think I was a little bit. It would have been through my friend who got very influenced because his dad was very much into the Beatles.
hmm
And so it was round another friend's house, maybe a bit later on when I was about 8 or 9, that I really started listening to the Beatles, to Bowie, never know, never know which
Yeah.
one he is.
You say Bowie,
They,
I say Bowie. Yeah.
yeah, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. David Bowie, and then all these kind of bands at the same time. But the Beatles, yeah, I don't think I appreciated them as much as I do now. I
Mm.
think that's the weird thing. Do your children like the Beatles?
I wouldn't say they would love the Beatles. No, they don't particularly listen to older music at the moment. But again, it's
Yeah,
something maybe when you mature and you grow into it and you appreciate the complexities of the music and or the lyrics and things like that. Maybe you understand it later on. Because I've had a sort of
I
I've had a kind of like a second wind of the Beatles. At
yeah.
the time, I thought, oh yeah, the Beatles, they're an old band and that sort of thing. And then you start playing their records again, and you think, oh, this is really such a good song. I'm singing along to it, or that's a really good lyric, or the composition of it sounds really good, and you really appreciate it.
You do. I think I wonder if it skips a generation a little bit.
Mm,
So the reason I say that, you would have had the initial fans, and probably their children were a bit more like, "Oh, okay, whatever." It's not all of them. Some of them. I've got my own music, Dad.
yeah,
This kind of thing. Ah.
yeah,
And then maybe my generation, so would have appreciated it from that. So people born in the 80s and maybe 90s
mm,
would appreciate it, especially with the Oasis coming back. Oasis appearing, basically. Sorry. And interestingly, my son now really likes the Beatles.
hmm
He really likes the Beatles. And I think that's because people sort of teachers of my sort of age are now teaching him about the Beatles, particularly that song, We Say Hello and You Say Goodbye. Hello, hello, this one. I don't know if that's he sings it all the time.
yeah,
And then now I listen to songs like Paperback Writer, and my son is
wow,
playing them.
yeah.
And I'm like, he's like, Dad, I love this music. I don't want to tell him the gosh, 75 years ago they started, pretty much 65
right.
years ago. Yeah,
I
don't think I'm ready to tell him that.
Of course, for a lot of older people, there's a lot of nostalgia, isn't there, with listening to the Beatles?
That's it, yeah.
You know, it reminds you of your youth and your younger days when you were probably there, maybe dancing or seeing them play live, perhaps, if you were lucky enough to get to see them playing live. So, yeah, there's nostalgia there as well.
And that's what I think, even people, it's strange, isn't it? Because you're right, it's a warm, sentimental feeling for the past, which is one of our key pieces of vocabulary, nostalgia. And I think even strangely enough, for people who weren't there, they understand the nostalgia.
Yeah.
So they kind of get a secondhand feeling of it. I don't, they feel it's from a time, but it's still quite a cool time, I think. The 1960s is seen as quite a cool time.
Yeah.
You know, it's this kind of breakaway from the boring, from the mundane, and let's have fun, let's party. So I think it still resonates. Whereas I don't really know anybody who listens to music from the early 1950s that much.
No.
Or 40s. That's gone.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe, well, Frank Sinatra's a bit later anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's really intriguing. It's like music for now starts around the late 1950s with people like Elvis and the Beatles, and then it starts again with Mozart. There's a gap. There's a gap where nobody listens to. You know, I can't imagine people rocking out to Victorian music.
No, you're right. No, definitely, it definitely marks an era of music. British music, of course. Fly the Flag for Britain, of course.
Yeah.
Great British band. And as I say, you know, the music lives on. And it was only a few months ago I went to our village hall where there was a band doing covers of the Beatles.
Yeah.
I think they were called, there's lots of bands out there doing the covers. There's the bootleg Beatles, aren't there? And this was called, I forget what this band was called, but they were doing the covers of all the Beatles. Just, I couldn't believe how many songs there were. It was one hit after another.
Yeah.
You know, so many songs. Yeah.
I mean,
Jude.
they were.
Hey Jude. We're all singing along to Hey Jude. That's one of my favorites too. Yeah.
Did you know I once sang Hey Jude with a taxi driver in Belo Horizonte, Brazil?
Really? For any reason?
Yeah. No, it was early in the morning as well. Basically, this taxi driver, an Uber driver, he picked me up, and then he got really excited. I was British, and then without any kind of warning, he just started singing to my face, and I was like, "Look at the road, look at the road." But he was singing "Hey Jude," and I thought he really wants a moment here. He feels that I don't know if he felt he'd met Paul McCartney here or something. So I started singing with him. It was even before 7 o'clock in the morning. I was singing "Hey Jude" in a taxi, in an Uber, going to a student's flat to kind of teach them, which was really, it's a surreal experience. But the Beatles, that's another thing. Brazil love the Beatles. The Beatles are massive over there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's they ask us, is it the most popular band in England? Possibly not everybody's most popular band, but they're still incredibly popular in general.
Most well known, certainly.
Yes, that's what I'd say. I'd say we've had so many amazing bands that everybody's got a favorite.
Yeah.
But there you go. So we've talked a lot about the Beatles, more than I imagine we knew. This is how amazing they are, because I wouldn't necessarily say I know their music. I like their music. I love their music. I'm now currently reliving it through the eyes of my son. But I wouldn't say I was totally knew everything about the Beatles. And I've realized now we know actually more about the Beatles than I knew that we knew. If that makes any sense. I know more about the Beatles than I realized.
Yeah.
And that's how iconic and kind of famous the legacy they have over us.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for listening to us today. If you do want to buy us a cup of tea, or Rob a cup of tea, or both of us a cup of tea, there is the option to buy us a cup of tea to support this podcast down in the description. I've been drinking, by the way, a cup of coffee this time from a mug that looks like a cockapoo.
And I don't know what mine is.
That's an amazing mug as well. Look at that.
Who are they?
I have no idea. BT21 by the looks of it. But there you go. This is a cockapoo, I believe. So thank you very much for listening to us today. And Rob, thank you very much for joining me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
Thank you so much. It has been great. See you next time.
I was waiting for you to say, imagine that. Take care. See you later.